Assalamu alaikum warahmatullah. Welcome to Islam 21C's one-on-one big discussion. I'm bringing the big, our guest is bringing the discussion. My name is Suleman, your host. I'm the Islam 21C Islamic finance editor, and alhamdulillah we have a special guest with us in the studio today, and you'll be hearing about himself, his background, and what he's going to be talking about. Alaikum Saad.
Walaikum Assalam. Thank you for having me.
Excellent. Alhamdulillah, it's a great pleasure to have you all the way from the US of A, representing who today?
Wahid Invest, actually.
Okay, so yeah. Wahid, these are the guys that we've seen all over the buses in the UK. They've on billboards. What's it all about?
Well, Wahid is actually a digital Sharia-compliant investment platform. In a nutshell, we basically offer people investments in stocks and shares that adhere to specific Sharia-compliant guidelines. And we felt like that this was a very much a needed service for Muslims, basically around the Western world. And that's the reason why we first started in America, and then now we're introducing it in the UK as well.
Okay, right. So it's an Islamic Sharia-compliant investment firm that uses technology to facilitate investments. All right?
Yes, exactly.
Good. Right. So we're going to tackle that a little bit further. Let us know a little bit about yourself, Saad. So why did you get into the murky world of finance?
Well, it actually happened by chance. I was born in Kingston upon Thames, went to school in Banstead, studied ACCA here in London, and very soon realized that accounting wasn't really for me. The whole auditing world was just too dry for me. It would put me to sleep.
No way.
I'm more of a conversational person. I wanted to help and work with people rather than just playing with numbers and giving them someone an end result to it. So just on the off chance, I got an opportunity to work for Swiss Bank, actually in private equity, more so as in an analytical role. So I got the opportunity to work in Switzerland. That really built my interest in the financial services industry overall. So after doing the private equity work for a couple of years, I actually got an opportunity to work in New York. So that for anyone in the finance field is almost like a dream come true, that you're working on Wall Street. My address was 60 Broad Street, right across from where the Bull is and next to the New York Stock Exchange. So when you're someone in your mid-20s, that's like an ideal dream come true. Yeah, but 2 years later, you realize that it's not all, a forest of woods, really. And then the 2008 market crash happened, which I experienced firsthand there.
So how did you find working in conventional finance?
Very different. Definitely unique. You really have to put that sort of retail client service hat on you and really put the client's interest first, because it's like people's money that you're dealing with. As a trader, it's more really fast paced. You're literally just deciding in an instant if you want to buy and sell stocks and so on. After the 2008 market crash, it kind of changed my own mindset about how investments should work for people. And I wanted to be more in a fiduciary role. In other words, putting clients' interests first.
Okay, so would you say before the crash, not just you, generally, the way that finance was done, it didn't put the interests of the clients first?
To some extent, probably not. It was more of like this trading world where people just wanted to call in and say, hey, I want you to buy XYZ stock for me. I've got this much money and I want to invest in it. There was no discussion of, the probability of the market, KYC, know your customer kind of an approach, or whether you can offer them a diversified portfolio, for instance, rather than just doing trades only. And I think when the crash happened, it was good and bad. Of course, there were a lot of corrections in the market that were required. I won't go into those details, but it definitely put more of a sense in Wall Street to say, hey, some of us need to realize that our client's interest comes first. And that's what pushed me then from being just a trader into private wealth management, where being fiduciary is extremely important. You discuss client situations. In some cases, you have to decide whether you want to even work with a client or not, because maybe investments in the stocks and shares might not be ideal for them based on their personal circumstances.
So why the move into Islamic finance?
I think it's because I want to do something for our own people as well. For someone who went to pretty much an all-white school, coming from a Muslim faith, parents from Pakistan, the one thing I realized even growing up, and that leads to the answer to your question, was education was important. We talked about getting your degree in. Don't think about music and this and that, or this doctor, engineer, accountant, and so on. So we're very good at earning money. However, The biggest issue we all have is that once we earn that money, we're not really sure how to invest it for our future or for our retirement. The run-of-the-mill approach is always real estate.
Sure.
And I think as I worked more into the private wealth management space, I kind of realized that there has to be a better, more efficient way for us as a Muslim to invest, because if we're taught, and not if, but we know that we're taught to adhere from certain activities as a Muslim, whether it's eating, unacceptable meat, drinking alcohol, tobacco, gambling, and so on. If we're not supposed to indulge in those activities, why is it that I should be making money from it? I had a retirement account. Even as someone working in the investment field, I didn't pay attention to what I was investing in, whether I had a Budweiser stock or not, or what we call a highly leveraged, a company that has borrowed a lot of money, paying heavy amounts of interest in it as well, or bonds that are conventionally interest-based.
Okay.
And that kind of moved my interest into understanding and learning about the whole Sharia compliance space.
Okay, so I'm going to take this back a little step,
Sure.
right? So we'll cover how Wahid is different in terms of the investments they offer,
Sure.
and the Sharia compliance element, because it can mean different things to different people.
Absolutely.
So we should qualify that statement. What would you say to the person who has a almost laissez-faire attitude to investing for the future, saying that, our qadr is written, right? Our risk is written. Do we need to save?
Wonderful question. I think the way I look at it, and from what I've learned from other scholars that we work with, and I've had the pleasure of sitting on panels and speaking with as well. Again, I don't know much about fiqh at all, but I can talk about capital markets all day long.
Right.
Is that we shouldn't really shy away from creating wealth. Is one of the questions on the Day of Judgment that will be asked is, how did you earn your money and where did you spend it? Nothing wrong with saving either, because you do want to plan for what the future will hold for you. For our entire lives, we're not going to work forever. A time might come when nowadays, in fact, you see that because of better health, better sort of living standards, people are living for longer as well.
Sure.
You have a potential to outlive your own money. That is a scary sort of topic for people to discuss. Money is a very emotional thing for us. We have an emotional attachment to it. So I think there's nothing wrong with saving, but what's important is that if you're just sitting in cash, it loses value over time. Like the phrase that people say, cash is king. I personally disagree with that, because I think cash is not king, because if you're holding cash for a longer period of time, over time the cash is losing its buying power, its purchasing power.
Absolutely.
What you can buy with £10 today, you will not be able to a year from now.
And this is very important, I think, just so people understand that people who keep money in the bank, and this actually goes against Islamic principles of hoarding wealth. You shouldn't hoard wealth. Money was created to be circulating in society, benefiting, etc. And the fact that if you just keep money, it is devaluing effectively. And the example you gave is, or the way you described it in terms of buying power, is a very good way. I'm sure most people, if they think back 10 years, what you could get with £100,000 and what you can buy with £100,000 today, is not the same. So there's definitely an Islamic position to argue for investing obviously in a halal way. But I think also it's very important to just make a point here for some of our viewers and audiences, that even though it's prudent to save for a rainy day or save for later on in life, it shouldn't be the object of your purpose. And it shouldn't be, money is, the quality of money is to facilitate something as opposed to want it in of itself. And this is when we talk about finance, and obviously yourself working in the financial world, the Prophet ﷺ said, beware of the marketplace, because he knew of the wants and the desires that are involved in the marketplace. And the financial markets is the largest market in the world.
Absolutely, yeah.
And it's so easy to get caught up in it.
Absolutely it is.
And so you need that framework, you need that guidance, which for us, alhamdulillah, as Muslims, we have from the Sharia. And this is the aspect of Sharia compliance. So whilst Islam doesn't say that you should make money the object of your desire, it says that if you are going to make money, then do it the right way. And from Wahid's perspective, how do you define Sharia compliance?
Well, that's a wonderful question, and thank you for that explanation as well. It makes so much sense for a lot of people. The way we look at it is the reason why it was created was, first of all, to serve the underserved market of Muslims.
Sure.
Living in the Western world, working in the private wealth management space, I had clients come up to me when I was working for other firms. Hey, as a Muslim, I want to know that I can invest my money in ethical investments that adhere with my guidelines. I was not able to easily find it for them. Because some of the bigger investment firms don't really focus on it that much back then, at least I'm talking about 9-10 years ago. So for us, coming back to your point, to answer your question, why Wahid and the whole ethical aspect, is to make sure that as a Muslim, you know that your money is being invested based on your ethical and Sharia-compliant guidelines. Sharia-compliant guidelines are not something that we created ourselves, but they were actually established by an organization called AOFI, AAOIFI, which is the Accounting and Auditing Organization for Islamic Finance Institutions. Based out of Bahrain, they work with many different scholars from around the world and created guidelines called Sharia Rule number 21, something that our Ethical Review Board, an external sort of Sharia-compliant board that actually overlooks. Based on those guidelines and their expertise is how we were able to structure the investments in the stock market that we'll be able to offer to our clients. So
Absolutely.
in a nutshell, things that we avoid will be, as I mentioned earlier, alcohol, tobacco, gambling, stocks, even usurious institutions like usury, interest-based, where there's bank stocks or even conventional bonds that a lot of people don't know are purely create riba-based returns. For investors. So those are the kind of investments that we tend to avoid and adhere away from, like steer away from them, and then provide investments that pass those guidelines.
Excellent. I think it's really important to add at this point around IOFI. They provide the minimum standards, and it's a cross-section of scholars from different fiqh backgrounds, from different madhahib, who come together and look at issues. Financial literacy is a challenge, especially in the Muslim community. And you'll find, even in the general community, to be honest, how many people really understand finance? Why did the financial crash happen? Because even the people working in these jobs didn't know what they were doing.
Right. Some people didn't know what they were doing in the first place. Yeah.
Exactly. And so when we talk about what the Sharia provides and the things you said, the type of industries you can't invest in, I think that's a really important point. The second aspect that the Sharia really brings is the way that you transact. And this is what you'd find with some of the financial products, is that there's no underlying product. And so it's a mirage built upon a mirage. You know, people are investing in something that doesn't exist. And so this is great that through IOFI guidelines and the Sharia itself, it really stipulates that you need to be investing in something real, either a commodity or something that's service-backed. And so
Absolutely.
the scholars who've looked at Wahid's, we'll talk about what Wahid actually offers.
Sure.
What's their approach? How have you gone through the Sharia compliance process?
Well, the whole process kind of involved, first of all, finding the right scholars to work with us. We wanted to go after the ones that have knowledge of fiqh and finance as well, because the merger of both is really important. If someone just knows about fiqh, that's wonderful, but if they don't know much about finance, the selection criteria makes it that much more difficult for them to look at. Yes, Wahid is actually a member of AOFI as well, which puts us in a really good place with them. But then the whole approach was that we wanted to build what we call a diversified portfolio for clients to invest in. You said the right thing earlier, that most people don't even know how investments work. So we wanted to make that process easy for them. We wanted to remove that thinking part away and say, just come, decide based on how much risk you're willing to take in the market. Because the biggest risk you'll ever experience is the market risk itself. We will choose the investments for you. You don't have to worry about when to buy, when to sell. You just put your money in, park it, watch it, monitor it. Done. So in order to do that, the process was we selected various funds out there in the market space, gave them to our Sharia scholars and said, can you do your research on it, go through the stocks that are within those baskets of funds, and as long as they adhere with AOFI guidelines and your own requirements for this to be permissible enough, as long as we don't have bank stocks in it, there isn't any alcohol, there's not pork, we'll be good to go. The one caveat to that also is called Purification, and that is part of the Sharia screening that was followed to see how many of these companies are generating revenue of 5% or less from impermissible investments that we should not get involved in. If it's above 5%, based on AOFI guidelines, you're not supposed to invest in those. So that was also part of the criteria. In a nutshell, you're looking at a line of business and financial ratios,
Yeah.
meaning what are the financials of that company pretty much. So those were the guidelines that were primarily followed when looking at this. The 5% ratio is something we still follow quite actively at Wahid. It's actually what we call the purification report or remediation report in Mecca, is provided to our clients every year. So the best part is they don't have to worry about calculating the purification on their own. As part of the Sharia work that we do is that we send them their report every year based on their investments and which stocks need to be purified perhaps, and we tell them how much money to donate to charity. We always try to emphasize that this is not sadaqah, this is not zakatul mal, this cannot be given to a masjid or to print a Quran. It's purely for charitable cause only, because you're not supposed to keep this money with you.
Yeah, so maybe I'll give some context to our listeners and viewers on this. So we're living in a time where financial transactions are very complex, and we really are in that time where the Prophet said that everyone will be covered in the dust of riba. And unfortunately, the economy is such, especially the non-Muslim and now the Muslim economy as well, that there's impermissible either products or services or activities interwoven with the general services that they offer. Now, IOFI, they've said that's 5%. So what they say is that if a business is generally permissible, but it makes some money from impermissible activities. So I'll give you an example that hopefully everyone should understand. A supermarket, if we take a supermarket like Tesco's, can you invest in Tesco? And if you said that, okay, they offer bakery, fruit, vegetables, etc. Oh, but wait a second, they also sell pork and alcohol. Now, if the pork and alcohol as a percentage of their sales was less than 5%, then you can invest in Tesco's, and that 5% of the income, it doesn't exist. And so that money you give to charity, and some scholars say, without expecting any reward, because Allah is pure and He only loves the pure. And so that money doesn't exist for you. What you can't do is benefit from it. Now, this 5% was derived from qiyas, from the scholars looking at it and saying, okay, look, this is what we consider it to be. Anything above 5%, then they will say that it's impermissible to invest in that company. So this is quite important for our viewers to understand.
Absolutely.
So this is a purification. So they say that 5% is the purification amount that needs to be given in charity. Before that though, if we say you invest in funds, so how does it work? A person comes and says, look, I've got some money I've been saving, Saad, look, I've been saving for the last 10 years. I've got, a pocket of money and I want to invest it in a halal way. What are you going to do for me?
Great question. So, number one, what people really need to realize is that Wahid being a digital investment platform, everything is done online. You have the human element involved, because a lot of people get kind of misconstrued that, if it's a digital online platform, there's no one available to help me. We actually have people working behind the scenes that take you through every step of your halal journey with us. That's how I like to put it. It's a journey, just like life is. That's what you're doing with your money. So, as I said earlier, that we've taken the thinking away. We didn't have to worry about buying and selling stocks. Funds, what in a nutshell means is that it's a basket with multiple different stocks in them. So that one basket allows you what we call diversification. You're diversifying your options to invest. So someone would come up to us and say, I have some money, like you said, and what can I invest in? First question would be, well, we have a general questionnaire online that you can fill out, which is more like a suitability thing. Based on strict guidelines in the UK, those suitability questions have to be answered. So we need to ensure that the person investing, A, is comfortable investing that money, and B, understands the market risks involved with it. Hence, diversification is important, because the market never overall goes in one direction. It always goes up and down. So we invest your money in funds which are a basket of various stocks in areas such as emerging markets, countries that have potential for growth over the long term, international markets, so companies that are already well established around the world, performing really well in certain line of businesses, again, technology, construction, and so on. We won't invest in banking and others. And then the two other, what we call asset classes, so we are diversifying your investments, will go in Sukuk, which are Islamic bonds actually, and then commodity, primarily gold, because we feel like gold is a good long-term play. So the client wouldn't have to worry about, okay, so now which fund can I invest in? We will do the diversification for you. You have to choose what sort of a risk level are you comfortable with? Do you want to be very aggressive? In other words, like the way I tell my clients is, are you looking to invest like a teenager? that you have long time ahead of you, you're willing to take more risk, means you'll be mostly in stocks only, because stocks are very volatile. They fluctuate quite a bit, you know that already. Yeah. But if they want to be moderate or conservative, according to that, their money will be dissected in all of these asset classes.
So when you say stocks, and I'm
Yes.
breaking it down
Sure,
again for our viewers, when you say stocks, you mean stocks in companies? How are you defining stocks? So,
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So stock is basically an ownership in a company. For example, Apple maybe. It's a technology company, makes laptops and iPhones. If you buy one publicly traded share of Apple, that's a stock that you have purchased, you become at a very fractional level an owner in Apple because you bought that one share. That is what a stock is of a company.
Exactly. And the reason I'm saying that, because some people may consider stock being actual physical stock, the Apple product,
Yeah.
as opposed to the
By
share,
all means, there's
which is the
more to-
ownership
Yeah,
of.
the share, the ownership actually, rather than the physical stock. Yeah.
Excellent. So it's interesting you mentioned Islamic bonds. Now, bonds are quite controversial from an Islamic perspective because they're debt-based. So how are Islamic bonds different?
That's a great question. And like you said earlier, that bonds are definitely debt-based. And what most people don't realize when they're investing in bonds is that you're pretty much acting like a bank. Because like you said before, debt, meaning that you are not physically owning anything in a bond. You're owning the debt of a company by saying, hey, I'll give you some money, and in return, I'm expecting a fixed rate of return, however that may be created by you, and I want that. And at the end of when that bond matures, which is the term in which the bond is invested for, I'll get my money back. And that's where the whole riba and the controversial aspect comes in, because the income from bonds is defined as riba. So what we did with Sukuks was, and Sukuks have been around, by the way, for quite some time. Malaysia was one of the countries that actually first ones introduced it years ago. I think I want to say in the 1970s, but I don't want to be wrong with it. But the whole concept of a Sukuk is that in order for you to participate in an exchange of profit, you need to have potential for loss, but also ownership. So what Sukuks do, unlike bonds that have a debt ownership, in Sukuks, similar to stocks of shares of a company, you are owning a business. So say, for example, it could be a paper factory maybe that produces paper and then sells it. They are looking to create a Sukuk because they want to expand. The Sukuk holders, the owners of the Sukuk, will invest their money in it. As the paper factory makes a profit, they will share a portion of it with the Sukuk holders. However, if any given month, let's say the paper factory doesn't make any money at all, they had zero profit, they're not liable to pay any money towards that Sukuk. Right. That is what solidifies the validity of it being Sharia compliant and permissible. And that's what we do. Now, however, with Sukuks, we don't use like small Sukuks like paper factories and so on. They're more sovereign Sukuks that are used in a fund. So you have multiple Sukuks in there that clients invest in.
Very good. So it helps from a risk perspective, and from a Sharia perspective, quite comfortable that it's there's an underlying asset and service being provided, as opposed to money being made on money, which is what the traditional bonds are.
Yes, yes.
Very good. Okay, so to talk a little bit about the Islamic or the UK experience when it comes to Islamic investments, the Muslim community, mashallah, is very generous. Last Ramadan, they gave over £100 million in charity in Ramadan alone, alhamdulillah. I was reading that we have something like 10,000 millionaires, Muslim millionaires in the UK alone, alhamdulillah. And Muslims, I guess, because they're an immigrant community, they've been wealth creators in the sense that they've created business. Some of them who have come, especially from, I guess, those who were second generation coming from Africa, they've been very good in terms of business, alhamdulillah. So there is definitely this sense of wealth creation and making money, alhamdulillah, and being successful at it. Where the UK has had a bit of a challenge is in the past when we've had people offering Islamic or Sharia compliant services, that they haven't always gone the right way. Okay, so we've had our own example of perhaps not on Bernie Madoff's level, but there have been examples where people have scammed people using Islam as a tool to sell. And I think it's very important that we can show that we have regulated companies. And this is really important. Yes. So when we talk from as a Muslim, right, first of all, our question should be, is it halal?
Yeah.
If it's not halal, then we shouldn't be involved in it. It's not Sharia compliant. Then from a prudence perspective is, should I invest in this? One's from a returns perspective, and secondly from is my money safe? Am I investing with the right people?
Safeguard of it, yeah, of course.
Absolutely.
Of course.
And so what's Wahid done in this space?
Well, before we could even offer our services, and it's a very sad but true reality of life that these things have happened, whether they've happened in the UK or even in America for that matter. Bernie Madoff being an American, the example that is used here, is that what you need to look at are a couple of things. You said all the right things, though, that am I investing in a halal Sharia platform? How much is it going to cost me? What are going to be my returns? Those are important questions. But I always tell people the one thing that Wahid did before, well, first we established ourselves in America. We cemented the fact that this kind of a service is needed for Muslims around the world. We're looking to become a global provider of Sharia-compliant investments in the stock market, inshallah sooner rather than later. Started in New York under 2 years ago when we offered our services, even though we were established in 2015. But before we could do anything, we had to go through proper regulators. Same thing in the UK. The FCA really goes through all your personal details of your company and the structure of it before you can provide any kind of an investment product in the stocks and shares market, basically, let alone advice. We're not even at that level yet for that. We're doing another registration soon. Once that is passed, we can even give advice. Right now, our platform does everything. Client chooses their risk profile and they're good to go because we've selected the investments. But the FCA is very strict now. Because of all these things that have happened, they really take a close look at how fiduciary we are, what kind of information we're giving our clients. Each account at Wahid is protected up to £85,000 if, God forbid, we were to go out of business. We don't see that happening. We have expanded quite a bit in America now. Alhamdulillah, we have clients in every single state in America, including Hawaii and Alaska. Alhamdulillah. Within a matter of months, we've seen tremendous growth in UK as well. The amount of inquiries we have coming in, we're expanding our teams here as well to provide that service and be able to keep up with the inflow of queries that are coming in. But the FCA is very strong on this thing. So before we could do anything, we had to make sure that our registrations were properly done, background checks on the senior directors of the corporation, the registration requirements, the liquidity of the company, the type of funds we're offering, how legit they are, has to be done. So the one thing I'll always say that the 3 to 4 top questions you want to ask is, number one, don't just worry about how long the company's been around for, but how legal are they?
Good.
Who is governing them? Who's auditing them? We get surprise audits. For that, all our information needs to be available for clients. Every conversation that we have on the phone is recorded. Every email is recorded. Every investment transaction is overlooked as well when we get audited. So it's a lot of work you have to go into when you're providing this kind of a service. And then, of course, the product itself, whether it's Sharia or not, don't take someone's word for it. Look into who are the scholars that are working with them. Not on their payroll, but working for them, meaning the ones that we work with, Straightway Ethical Advisory Service out in New York, they're not, we don't own them in any way. They're an independent entity that provides an audit service to us. They look at the investments we want to offer. Without their assurance, we can't even invest in those products for our clients, for that matter. So these things are very important. And then finally, how much is going to cost you and what sort of potential returns you could get, which are never guaranteed, but you want to have a ballpark figure there.
Absolutely. I think that's a very good summation of everything.
Exactly.
I'd also add is, are there any tax implications?
Yes and no. In the UK, of course, is different from the US. So currently, the 2 type of investment accounts that we offer, and this comes to your earlier question about, hey, what can I invest my money in? Well, either you can do a general individual investment account, as I call it, which is a liquid account. Liquid meaning you have no restriction or lock-in period as to when you can take your money out. The minimum requirement is only £100. That actually comes down to less than £3.50 a day if you were to save it for a month. That amount comes to £105. So it's less than that just to get started. And that's something we wanted to do, offer a diversified investment portfolio for clients that does not require a high minimum to get in. That's what investment advisors used to do in the past. So we took care of that. And then above that, to the part about the taxes, the individual account can be taxable because your gains, as they grow, you'll have to pay what's called capital gains tax on them. The other one is your individual savings account, the ISA. I know it's really popular in England. My own family members have it here. You can start with as little as £20. You can max it out at £20,000. But the growth in it is what we call in our industry is tax deferred. You're not paying any taxes on the gains right now.
Good.
You will pay when you take that money out. So a lot of people think of it as a long-term investment by saying, hey, if I'm 25, 28, or even 30, or in my mid-30s, early 40s, I have another anywhere from 30 to 25 years within which I'm going to retire. Let me save some more money for my retirement nest egg as well. And for that, an ISA can be a great tool, because you're not paying taxes on the gains now. When you take money out later on in life, perhaps you might be in a lower tax bracket then. You pay less taxes at that point. So that's a great tax advantage of an ISA.
Absolutely. And I think just to break that down for our viewers and listeners. So people in the UK, if you're earning money, you're going to be in a different tax bracket based on how much your income is. And so an additional income that you earn, it has to be taxed at your prevalent rate. So if you invest in the ISA, any income that's generated from that or any increase in that, you would pay tax on it.
Yes.
So if you don't take the money out and you put that away, so say in 20 years time, when hopefully you're retired, inshallah, so you're not earning the money in the same way, so you're not paying that high tax rate. If you take that money out, it will be at a lower tax rate, thereby showing the tax efficiency in it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I strongly believe that people should definitely take advantage of that as and when their income and liquidity, being able to provide that sort of financial resource for themselves to be able to invest in it.
Jazakallah khair, Saad. Really appreciate you going through what Wahid has, your own personal journey as well. And I'd just like to close with a few comments from myself. I think it's very important as Muslims that we support the right Muslim organizations, the right Muslim businesses, people who are trying to do things in the right way. The financial industry it's a mammoth. It's huge. It engulfs the entire world. It controls what's happening in worlds. It can make and break countries. And so if we find pockets of individuals and companies trying to do things the right way, then as a community, I definitely think we should be supporting them. But it has to stack up. They have to be sincere and genuine in terms of what they offer, in terms of being halal. And alhamdulillah, if they're abiding by IOFI's rules, then this is a great starting place. Also to know that Islamic finance is still a nascent industry. It's only been around since 1970. This is the reality of it. And we're in the space of mu'amalat. Now mu'amalat is not something that's straightforward. Everyone has a clear-cut opinion on it. The scholars today are having to deal with real challenging issues when it comes to finance. Really, because if they say something's impermissible, will they disadvantage the Muslim community? But at the same time, they have a responsibility to not make something halal that's clearly haram. So it is a challenge. So this is why we have guidelines and groups of scholars that give individuals like ourselves comfort. So you have to understand it within that context. So definitely support Muslim organizations who are trying to do things in the right way, who are professional about the way they do things. Number two, look at your own appetite. It's important that you don't risk everything beyond your capacity. But I would say also, it's important that you do try and move your money, whether it's Wahid or whether it's another organization. I think that people have this notion that we'll just keep it in the bank and we won't take interest on it, so we're doing something good. The reality is the bank's still making money from your money, and your money that's in the bank is being used for impermissible activities. And there's a beautiful statement from the scholar Malik ibn Dinar rahimullah, where he says 1 dirham that you've saved from impermissible activities is better than 1,000 dirhams that you give in charity. Okay, so this thing about pulling our money out from impermissible activities is something that's really encouraged, and something I would say, look, let's look at Islamic Sharia-compliant providers of where you can put your money. So this is good from that perspective. Managing your risk. And then the fact that it's regulated. If there are organizations who are regulated, Wahid's regulated, alhamdulillah, that should give you a sense of comfort that, okay, look, you're only going to be subject to market conditions and not individual wants and desires.
Absolutely.
You know, that you can't run off, Saad. We know where you live. Right?
No,
yeah,
really.
Kingston.
Yep.
We know your
Kingston
background.
upon Thames. Got my grandmother in Tadworth. Oops. No, there you go. Absolutely, you're so very right.
And this is important. So, from Islam 21C, we'd like to say Jazakumullah khair. Thank you very much, Saad, for your time coming in.
Thank you so much for having me, brother.
And we wish success to Wahid. We wish success to Wahid, alhamdulillah. And we would like to see more innovation, more products coming out, and to other people, other individuals to rise to the challenge. Let's have a market flooded with Muslim products and services.
Absolutely, more the merrier. I mean, we're not shrinking in population at all. We're much only growing. The more choices we have, the better options we will have as well. And that's inshallah what our future goal is as well, to be a provider of various products and services within the Sharia compliant stock market investment space as we grow and move forward.
Jazakallah to all our viewers and listeners. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.